Welcome to Roundabout Creative Chaos, a podcast about people who make things and the stories behind why they do it. I'm your host, Tammy Coron, and this is episode 152, recorded on July 14th, 2026. On this episode, Bob Wegner. Bob is a multi-instrumentalist, music historian, writer, editor, archivist, and visual researcher. He's played guitar in more than 1,000 performances of Queen's We Will Rock You, performed with classic albums live, and worked on projects involving artists like Rush and Led Zeppelin. He's also the author of Max Webster High Class, a book that took 7 years to research and write. We talk about Bob's music, his love of Max Webster, and what it takes to dig through years of photos, recordings, interviews, concert dates, and other pieces of music history to tell a band's story. We also get into the people, performances, and songs that made Max Webster such a fascinating band to follow. A quick note before we start. This conversation was recorded in several shorter sessions because of some technical limitations. But every time we stopped, we had more to talk about when we started again. By the time we wrapped up, Bob and I had talked for more than 3.5 hours. What you're about to hear is about 2 hours of that conversation, with as much of the original discussion intact as possible. You may notice a few transitions between sessions, but we kept the conversation itself as natural as we could. And one more note before we get started. If you listened to the last episode, you may have noticed some microphone issues. You'll hear a little of that here too, but much less. And more than likely, this will be the last episode where we have to deal with it, because I finally figured out the problem. Apparently, my cats were messing with my mic's automatic gain feature. That setting's been locked, along with the rest of them, so we should be good from here on out. Are you ready to talk tech, music, arts, and zombies? I know we are, so grab your crossbow and let's get this episode started.
Tim,
I
at last we have succeeded.
I know, I know. I have a feeling this is either gonna be one heck of an episode or one not great episode. It
Oh
could
god,
go either
who
way.
told you either of these nonsensical things?
So you're in the middle of a tornado warning right now?
It seemed to be the case, but it was 5 minutes of storming, and it just went from yellow sky to dark sky to blue sky,
Okay.
with the forest fires. Absolutely bizarre. The smell of the forest fires is starting to show up now in Quebec. This is quite exciting.
Really? I didn't realize that Quebec was prone to forest fires like that.
Yeah, any place with trees. This is the thing now. Turns out
Yeah.
trees burn, and they burn more with climate change.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. I mean, I'm in the mountains of East Tennessee, and I never thought for a minute that we would have a hurricane, and yet we did. And it was devastating. And there's still across the mountain down trees. And in fact, I'm concerned what's going to happen with that regarding the forest fires because we are prone to fires here.
Oh.
And now we have all these down trees that we didn't have prior to a hurricane because you're not supposed to get hurricanes in the mountains. That doesn't happen.
No, but, a lot of things aren't supposed to be happening these days, and they're happening, so we live in interesting times, don't we?
We sure do. But one thing that is happening, and it's apparently supposed to happen, is this podcast. So, Bob, I appreciate you working through all the last minute trials and tribulations. As you know, Tim is not going to be here tonight. I know he is super bummed about it. He is our resident Canadian, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not a Canadian, right?
Mm.
But I didn't know too much about the Canadian music scene, so I have spent the better part of today researching everything I could on Canadian music because I asked him, I'm like, well, who's this Max Webster guy? And he's like, no, it's not a guy.
Yeah,
It's a band.
yeah.
So I know that you're like the guy to ask, and you're supposed to be the guest on the show, but I'm going to lean on you as sort of my professor on all things Canadian music because
Oh,
you apparently are the guy that knows everything, especially about Max Webster. So
nonsense.
tell me who you are, what you do, how you got involved in all this. I mean, I know you've been into music since you were like 5. You were playing the piano and 12
Oh,
with the guitar. So I've done my research, but I want to hear it straight from you now.
oh my goodness. Well, yeah, who am I? I mean, am I gonna go Carl Jung here? Just who am I? What am I? Ugh. Well, the answer you're probably looking for is I'm a musician, a writer, and I guess now getting into being an archival producer for
Yeah.
documentaries. I'm doing all kinds of different things, and that's my professional life. It's been a wild ride. I've I've traveled the world and played in musical theater freak shows and traveled all around doing such things like that and going onto cruise ships and playing in bands, ending up, here and there and having wonderful and bizarre experiences and everything in between. And ended up writing a book, which by most accounts seemed to do all right, on Max Webster. And that's led me into the world of just getting to archival work because that was a lot of my work for the book was going through anything from the CBC archives to um, I mean CBC. Well, if you have an American audience, I guess it's kind of similar to something like NPR, I suppose. It's the public broadcaster, and these places all have archives, or university archives, or just private collections. Professional photographers or fans of the band, and worked with the band members, and spent 7 years of my life, and basically created what's ultimately a PhD thesis on this band in the form of this coffee table book that's monstrous.
It's a
And
beautiful book.
oh, you've seen it?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it. As I said, when Tim wanted, because we talk about, well, who we're going to invite to the show and whatnot, and he was telling me all about you, and he's like, you got to go check out High Class, take a look at it. And he had just sent me some pictures. You were recently at some type of convention or something, and he had you sign the book, and he was sending me pictures. And then I saw on your website you had this really nice video where it's for, I guess it was for your second edition that you just came out with at the end of November, and you were going through the pages and saying a little bit about the book, and I was like, that is a absolutely gorgeous,
Mm.
gorgeous, beautiful book. And I wish I had it in my hands, but I don't. I mean, 7 years is a long time to
It
write a
is.
book, and you could tell that you put a lot of time and effort, and it looks like a high quality book to me.
Well, it is, and I mean, thank you for saying all that. It's funny, just when you're so close to a thing, you just lose so much objectivity about how great or how poor something can be, no matter what it is. You just kind of get desensitized to whatever the thing is. In this case, it's a very good thing. And you kinda lose sight of that, and then someone says, "Oh, yeah, that thing's beautiful," and it's just, "Oh, okay, well, thanks." Just to me, it's just my book. It's just sitting there on the couch, and it's fine. Yeah, it's my book. Great, yeah. But that's how these things go. But never mind me and my nonsense. I just looked up you before we started doing this, and the last guest that you had on, Ken and Roberta Williams. So I played King's Quest VI as a kid, and I realize now this game was a large part of my cultural upbringing in
Really?
in my youth. Yeah, without even really realizing it. Just there are so many. Did you ever have you ever seen this game?
Oh, yeah.
So
It's
you
King's
know it.
Yeah, King's Quest, the entire series was one of my favorites of all time.
It's absolutely incredible. I kind of played the 5th one, but the 6th one is the one that came out when I was a kid, and just it's influenced by all these different things. There's the Arabian Nights and Alice in Wonderland and Greco-Roman classical mythology and Beauty and the Beast and all this Celtic stuff. It's just and because each of the islands you go to has these things, and it was hugely influential because these ideas stuck with me, and I would later just come across them because I knew them, and I would just look into them more because they were all fascinating on their own, and that was just so much of an education. So that is so cool that you had the people who made those games on your podcast, and I'm flattered that I'm somehow having to follow that up now, which is just an impossible task, but try me.
No, it's not impossible. I mean, you have done a lot with in the music world, and you self-published a book and you've had to go through and not only find all the information on Max Webster, but the archival footage and then learning to do the actual author work, editorial work. Where do you go to create this book? And I want to talk to you a little bit about the technical side of that stuff. But I mean, that to me is it's as an incredible journey as game development and game design is, in my opinion.
That's such an interesting way of kind of, just that kind of comparison. You're absolutely right. It's a great analogy. I mean, because yeah, everything has to be made from the ground up in some way. And in this case, just I had no idea what I was doing. I was a guy that realized there was a niche to be filled. I'm the kind of person where it's just, oh, this thing doesn't exist, and no one has made it so clearly. This is my job now. And so I took it upon myself. I just started putting together just a document. All I had was a giant notepad document that started to become a quasi chronological type thing. And at the bottom, I had different sections of different just areas of things. I mean, maybe the studio sessions, maybe the instruments they played, things they did after the band broke up, and just all the different sections were there, and it just all kind of got placed where it needed to get placed as I interviewed all the different people, not just the band members, but producers, engineers, the road tech, the crew guys, road crew. Some of the funniest and best stories from the earlier years when they were traveling come from the road crew guys, and they remember everything. And that was an absolute delight. And then going through the band members' personal archives and all that stuff gave me all the material to work with, and fans had a lot of stuff too. And so there's your material, and you slowly start putting this together. And a friend of mine who'd done a similar kind of book on Led Zeppelin told me about 5 years ago. This would have been the pandemic still, 2021. The book didn't come out till 2023, and I told him, "I think I'm about 90% done, 95% done." He said, "Bob, the last 5% is 95% of the work."
Yep.
And he could not have been more right. All I had was a document. I had very little else. I needed to figure out how to use Adobe InDesign. And amidst all that, I God, I mean, I had to just find a printer and a warehouse and work with a customs broker to get them from England to here, and just the number of hats you were wearing. Yeah, I found old video footage. It was Super 8 footage, of the band in the 1970s, so I had to I mean, I kinda learned that skill, but I had to kind of stitch a whole bunch of things together into a nice longer film because my book release party in Toronto was also a film screening of all this old footage of the band that no one had
Oh,
ever seen before, and the band members were there watching it with me with 300 Max Webster.
really?
It was a really, really cool event, yeah, and just the number of hats that you have to wear in these kind of projects. If you don't have a team, then yeah, you're taking care of it all yourself, as well as being the writer and the editor and the researcher and the fact checker and all that stuff. And then booking the release party and making sure people are going to be there, finding a publicist, make sure it gets properly publicized. And then I ended up in the CBC and Globe and Mail, one of the major newspapers, Toronto Star, go on television and radio to promote it and all that. And then suddenly you realize you've sold nearly 1,000 books and it's time to do the second one. And at that point, then the main guy in Max Webster, Kim Mitchell, he's very well known in Canada. He won Junos, which is our Grammys. Many Junos he won, and he sold millions of records and did pretty well for himself. And he came on board in the end. He was hesitant at first, but for the second edition, he came on board and then opened up his archive to me and started promoting my book. And he was absolutely wonderful about it. And so the second edition was 50 pages longer with just all these wonderful photos, largely from his collection. And so it was a huge collaborative effort of just literally hundreds of people. My acknowledgments pages are 2 pages. It both just lists of people and in paragraph form, just thanking individual people whom, it takes a village. And without them, it couldn't happen.
What was it about Max Webster that you decided that, yes, this is the band I want to write about?
It was, well, just for some context, I would compare them to Frank Zappa. They're
Okay.
definitely analogous to that. They were very quirky, very left of center, very funny, and fantastic musicians who wrote great music with an excellent presentation. They started as a bar band and ended up headlining Maple Leaf Gardens. And the 1970s and 80s to do that, that's like an American band playing Madison Square Garden. Just that's the
Right.
apex of Canadian arena rock in the 70s, and they headlined there many times. So that's Max Webster. But what about them? Well, I just hit a point of realizing I love this band, and no one had ever done a real archival dig into them. And I just noticed that all kinds of lesser bands were getting books and documentaries done on them. And Martin Popoff had done a paperback book about Max Webster, which was great. But I read that and I just thought, yeah, he's done a good job, but I need to take this a step further and just do the day by day chronology and just really dig into the creative process of the band. How did these songs get written? And just no one had ever done this for this band. So yeah, it was a huge deep dive. And and the fans of this band are so dedicated to them that just half of my material just came from running a Facebook group on the band, and just hundreds of fans came forth with their photos and their ticket stubs and posters from the old concerts and their stories and and then, of course, you have to piece together the dates and the timeline because sometimes people's memories can be foggy, and over time, the truth shows up, and sometimes you hear 3 stories, 4 stories of the same thing, and it's kinda your job as the journalist to put that together, and then that's another hat you wear. You're basically being a journalist. You do 4 interviews, you hear the same story told in 4 different ways, and they were all there, and they all felt it the same way, but then over time, you realize just memory isn't a tape machine. Memory is it's how do I put this? I feel like I have something profound to say, but I don't know what I'm talking about. Memory is it's not a tape machine. It's our memories distilled by our emotions over time is the best way I can describe memory. And so it will change in everyone. They've done so many studies to show that people's memories can change over time. And it's got nothing to do with being a liar or trying to mislead people or even yourself. It's just how the brain works. It's absolutely fascinating. So when you're interviewing people, you have to be cognizant of this and you want to honor people's memories and um, not trivialize what they're telling you when you know there's an exaggeration or something happening. That's just their experience of it, and you just know what you can and should and couldn't and shouldn't print.
How do you reconcile with that though? I mean, if you are getting multiple accounts and some of them are wildly different, how, as the journalist, do you, number one, figure out which one is closest to the truth, right? Because the truth is sort of muddy sometimes, just in general.
Mm.
And how do you honor somebody's memory without stomping all over it?
Oh, it's easy. You just don't. You just don't stop. You be graceful and let them just genuinely and generously offer what they're offering. But it doesn't mean it's going to get printed in a book. But in some cases, it still did. There's one great Max Webster story. There's a song on their second album called Gravity, and there's second verse, second chorus, and then there's this gorgeous breakdown in the middle of this song, and there's this sound of what sounds like a key that is dropping, that's dropped onto the ground or something, or it could be a bottle opener and 4 different people or 5 different people, most of whom were there, they just can't agree on what this sound is. And of course, but they kept it in the final mix, and they didn't have to, but it's just such a hugely, um, consequential part of this song because it's made people wonder, "What is this?" And and whatever it was, is just something being tossed in the vocal booth when vocal overdubs are being done, and it was dropped in the instrumental section, and they could have totally taken the fader and just brought it down, but they didn't. And I since have heard early mixes of some of their albums because I had access to some of their old archival tapes, and there's versions of that song with a different vocal track with that effect in there, which means it's from earlier on in the recording, and they still kept it. And that just makes that so much more interesting that that was a conscious choice. It wasn't some accident, and no one can agree on what it is. And I think that's so great that we'll just never ever know what the answer is. But I publish all of the four or so versions of that in the text, and the reader can decide for themselves or not because it's irreconcilable, and that's great. But it takes up half a page of a 450-page book. I love those mysteries. That's history. History is the investigation to try to sort out what happened. And sometimes enough time has to pass to be able to do that investigation. And sometimes you can figure out, archaeologically or otherwise, what happened, and sometimes you just can't. And shrug your shoulders and just have the conversation. And sometimes that in itself is good enough.
How was it meeting all of these different people who have this very similar, very strong interest in the band?
Well, it's all an incredible trip because everyone perceives it differently, especially if you're in it. If you are in it and you are in the eye of the storm, you're just going to see it in your way. And and some people just have better memories than others inherently. Um, but but a couple of guys in the band remembered a lot of stuff. And and yeah, to be with them and to just be present with them as they're sharing these memories is one thing, but you realize that they're wildly different personalities. And if you ask the same question to 5 or 6 different people, you may not get the same answers because there's different ways of connecting with people. For instance, the keyboardist, he's Terry Watkinson, he just passed. He's kind of a renaissance man. He's kind of like Brian May from Queen, who later went to school and got his PhD in astrophysics and just an absolutely brilliant man. And Terry Watkinson was the same way. After Max Webster folded, he went back to school. He went to the University of Toronto. He became a medical illustrator. And this is before computers took over medical illustration in the 90s. But he got his degree in that and became a professor for years at U of T. And so he's a visual artist, and he's an academic, and he is just a very, very different cat. So asking him questions and just trying to get answers out of him wasn't really the answer. He's a visual artist. So my strategy for interviewing him was bring the laptop with a slideshow of a bunch of photos. And from there, the stories flowed out from him. So that's kind of playing heads up hockey and just being able to gauge the personality to get the best response out of someone.
Right, which isn't always easy.
No, it's not. Some people ultimately just are a tough interview, and they don't remember much anyway, and it's just it is what it is because everyone's different. But in terms of the fans of the band, there's again a huge variety. You have people who are just have that teenage giddiness in the best of ways when exploring this music they loved decades ago. But then you have the people who were serious photographers but never really went professional, and they just have a whole other trip of just describing the lenses that they used at the different shows that they shot. 45 years ago, it's just, my god, I couldn't even tell you what I had for dinner last night, and this guy remembers exactly which lens he used because it was an outdoor gig, and then the week later, he shot them again indoors and had used a different lens. Just that blows my mind. I just but again, I don't know, but within my own stories, I could tell you the specs of my first computer when I was 11, and so I guess when you're that age, these things stick with you. I couldn't tell you about my second computer or my subsequent computers, but the first one, I can tell you every spec of that computer.
So when did you go from playing music to studying the history of music? Do you remember that moment in time where you sort of in a way put down the instrument and picked up the pen
No.
metaphorically?
Yeah, no, oh, and metaphorically or literally. I mean, some people do have specific stories for these kind of things of when they start doing things. This was definitely a gradual thing. I was just always interested in music. And I mean, not from the womb, but certainly shortly thereafter at some point. But certainly by the time I'm 14, 15 years old, just some kind of wheels are turning in here. And I definitely my one of the first albums I really loved was the live album by Queen, Live Killers. from the late 70s on the jazz tour. And the liner notes of that album just said recorded in Europe in early 1979, January, February, March kind of thing on a tour. And there's no more specific information. And at that point, that would have been, I'm just trying to think, when I started discovering bootleg recordings and audience tapes of concerts, the truly uncut recordings, which is where the truth is. Nowadays, anyone can record with their phone, and they do this at concerts, and it's annoying to watch a sea of phones for 3 hours at a concert now. Um, but for the sake of those of us who didn't bother to go and watch it on YouTube, but back then, the work you had to go through to record a concert with a cassette recorder or a reel-to-reel machine or Super 8 film and sneak in the recorder and the batteries and the tape, all of which was very expensive back then, to document a concert and duck security to be able to preserve a piece of music history. And nowadays, when you have a phone, you just pull it out and that's it. But back then, it was a lot of work. And there are incredible recordings of all of the old classic legendary acts recorded from the audience like this. And many of them rival the official live albums. And in some
Oh,
cases, they eclipse them. I mean, the stories of Mike Millard, the guy on the West Coast who would fake being handicapped in a wheelchair because he had his Nakamichi tape deck in the cushion, so to speak, and that's how he would get in. And his buddies would kind of keep watch around him to make sure that security guys weren't around, and they had just plans, backup plans for everything. And he had a system of braille on his cassette recorder for play, pause, rewind, fast forward. So he did these stealthy tape flips and literally missed just 5 seconds of the show when he flipped his tape. Just this guy was amazing, and this quality, the sound quality of these is absolutely incredible. 9 times out of 10, at least. And so discovering this stuff when I was a teenager was just so foundational for me because I started discovering the Queen tapes from 1979, and I started listening to them to compare the performances to see which nights the Live Killer songs came from. And eventually, I launched a website, queenlive.ca, with a section with the Life Killers analysis. And it was the only, and I think still is the only proper take anyone's ever done on this, because I guess no one had to do it again. But now people can do it on YouTube, and they've used the exact clips from the exact concerts. Sometimes there's edits halfway through a song or whatever, and just that is on YouTube now. If you want to look this up, someone has this on YouTube, and they probably credit me for doing this over 20, 25 years ago. So that's where that started. It wasn't professional. It was just because it was a thing that didn't exist and I made it. I've just always done this, and it's often very niche. Um, and but it doesn't matter. I don't care if it's 5 people or 500 people or 5,000 people that care about the thing. It's just something that needs to exist, and someone is going to enjoy it, and first, that person's me, and if
okay.
anyone else is also going to enjoy it, then great, and that's a very Frank Zappa way of looking at it. Just if you're not the audience for this, then great, then just listen to something else and enjoy something else. But it turns out this stuff just really, really connected with the Queen fan community and help build the Queen fan community. There was a curiosity around this stuff that I kind of started or helped start. There were a few of us, not many in the 90s, but it kind of helped start this. And by the early mid 2000s, I had my website up, and this community started to build. And then of course I realized that there were people in other fan communities doing the same thing. Led Zeppelin, there was the song remains the same. There was a website dedicated specifically to the analysis of the live album and the film, which are very different. And Jimmy Page, when he remastered that again years later, he went out of his way just to make arbitrary changes just so that the Garden Tapes guy could have something to write about, is literally what Jimmy Page said. Just, I love that guy so much. And so there's fan communities for this. Kiss Alive and Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous, all these live albums, the Deep Purple, Made in Japan. And of course, in some cases, they just put out the recordings of the entire tour in a box set 30, 40, 50 years later, as they did with Made in Japan. And the real connoisseur fans can listen to every concert And Yes did the same thing with Yes songs. There's a 14-disc box set with most of the concerts they recorded for that album. And I've listened to most of them, and because I love Yes, and this stuff always interested me. Just why do they make these decisions? Why do they choose this performance over that performance? And just because, of course, they want to best represent themselves and their product of that time. They wanted the world to hear that they were a great band, and sometimes it just wasn't a single performance that captured it. And it's a painstaking process for them, and they probably, Queen, going back to them, they've said they didn't enjoy doing that, and it would have been better if someone else just did it without them micromanaging it, but that is what it was. And because they made that choice, this kind of created this lifelong interest in me to just want to document these things with my favorite bands where they haven't been documented.
Was there ever a point when you were doing your research on these bands where you were surprised by something? Like you had already worked it out in your head that, the lyrics were because of this reason, or the decision was made for that, or you thought this particular musician behaved in a certain way. And then as you did your research or maybe even met them personally, were you ever shocked and surprised and like, oh, I didn't expect that?
That's such a great question. I have no doubt there are many great answers. But the thing is, when you're working on the project, it is so present in your mind. And but now it's a few years in hindsight. So I have to take a think. I could go through the folder of audio and then probably give you an answer. But let me just see. Let me just go with my instinct and see if just an answer shows up. I think with the Max Webster thing, just more generally, the creative process as a musician myself, I'm so interested in how other musicians make things. And and I especially love the Beatles box sets because they're so thorough. The outtake discs, um, and the booklets that describe exactly the creative process of each song from day to day. Those are some of the best things that have been made available to the world in terms of just documenting our species. Those box sets are just so incredible. And but there's been things like that for sure in the bands I've studied too. So yeah, for Max Webster, for example, their third album was called Mutiny Up My Sleeve. And I was lucky enough to get my hands on a very early version of that album with 4 songs that didn't make the final album. And I was able to ask many of the band members about what they might remember about that creative process. And it was a very chaotic time in the band, and the bass player was fired, and they got the next bass player, and the producer, Terry Brown, who's Rush's producer at the time as well, he walked out of the sessions, and the old bass player who was fired was called in to produce the album. Just it's just absolute chaos, I can only imagine. And again, one of those things where everyone recalls it differently, and it's so interesting how people remember it differently. Or maybe they block things out because it was so unpleasant. It's hard to know. They just remember as they remember it. Um, but that in particular is an example of just, yeah, why did you cut all these songs out and then add these other songs? I mean, why did you deem them to not be good enough? And yeah, and I got some great answers about that. And but especially that's such a unique case where someone who was in the band playing those songs before they record them, and by the time they record them, you're not in the band anymore. And now you're producing the record. You're grieving losing this band that you built from the ground up. And not everyone will admit that, but that's reality. He was grieving his band and had to produce it without him, with a different bass player. And the second bass player said, "Oh, he was a complete gentleman throughout the whole process." And, that's nice to hear. You never know when things are revisionist history. If you'd asked them then, maybe both would tell it differently. But in hindsight, bygones are bygones, and just second bass player couldn't say a bad word about the first bass player. And and that's just so nice. So things like that, because so often there are so many ugly stories about when, bands go through change in personnel, and these ones weren't pleasant either, to be clear, in this band. But time heals wounds, as the good old cliche says. And then all these guys, most of them anyway, came to my book release party, and it was just so nice to see them all together again, and to have the two drummers together, arm in arm, because the first one was heartbroken when he was sacked from the band, and the second one did the second half of the band's career. And but 45 years later, um, just my favorite photo from my entire book release is Paul Kersey and Gary McCracken arm in arm, and the looks on their face of just sheer joy of just, we're getting to relive this thing that we both did. Hey, you did the first half. Hey, I did the second half. Let's be pals. And that was the vibe of this thing. And just that's such a beautiful thing that just whatever bad things had happened, they'd all done the work and none of that showed up in that room. And that's, I think, what people took from that. It was just the way the band ended wasn't pleasant, but all those years later, including the band members, everyone in the room, it was just joyous. On the stage at this venue in Little Italy in Toronto, I had interviewing me a legendary DJ. His name is David Marsden. He is very, very well known in Toronto because he was DJ at a radio station called Chum FM, which now is a pop music station, but back then was FM radio as it was in the 1970s, where the DJ of questionable sobriety at any and all hours of the day or night would just play what they wanted and say what they wanted with no advertisers, no playlists, no anything. And this fellow got his hands on an advanced copy of Dark Side of the Moon before
Oh,
anyone on Earth. So Toronto was the first city to hear just the greatest album ever made.
yeah.
And this guy was on the stage interviewing me, and just what a trip that was. And at one point, I asked him a question because I thought, just you forget it's an interview; it's a conversation. And then he just said, "Hey, I'm running the interview here." I said, okay, okay, and I stopped asking questions.
You like to get involved in what the musician is thinking in their creative process, but you yourself are a musician, and I'm curious about your creative process.
I'm creative, really?
You are.
Um,
You are.
oh goodness me, that's such a that's something more specific than. I mean, there's so many applications to creativity. So give me a scenario.
So you're walking down the road and you have this burst of just like an insight, or what's that word when you're thinking about something? Inspiration. You're
Yeah.
inspired by something. You see a bird fly by or a couple walk past, and all of a
Mm.
sudden you start thinking about lyrics to a song, or perhaps a melody to go with it, or maybe you're in the mood to paint. I don't know, maybe you're deciding to take a break from music. I know a lot of musicians who are painters, or people who draw or code even. So you just
Yeah.
are hit with this wave of inspiration. Where do you go from there?
That's so interesting. Well, if it's walking down the street, very rarely does music show up there. I think music for me shows up when it's quiet and the world is noisy. And I'm more than likely to get a writing idea when I'm out in the world. And I'll always have a little notepad with a pencil and I'll scribble something down. But musical ideas, I think, yeah, they got to come when it's quiet and there isn't much around to distract me. Because then, because I don't know, sometimes songs are in your head, and that can happen in either scenario, but that's my thing. I know people who can't write if they're stationary, people who have to be on a train or something for that part of their mind to show up, and then they enter that state of flow or whatever else we may call it, where you're just very present and just unbelievably perfectly present, and you're just latching onto that as long and hard as you can because if you're lucky, it'll last a couple hours. And but songwriting, typically, just I'm alone and it's night and and something has happened that day, or you're just in the right space, whatever it is, something very good or something very bad or sad or happy, anything in between. And yeah, I have to be alone and quiet is typically how it happens. And I've never experimented with that kind of thing because I'm I'm just I'm not a songwriter, not really. I've made albums and stuff, but I don't call myself a songwriter in the way people traditionally call themselves that, and they churn out 3 songs a month, and that's just not me. And, um, I just but when it does happen, I'm taking note, and I'm recording the idea, usually with a guitar, and, or just humming a melody, whatever it is, and the thing shows up. And none of this is glamorous. That's all pretty standard how people write things. My stories of how I make other things are probably much more interesting than how I make music. It's I guess really the only really interesting creating of music story that I probably have with my own music anyway was when I lost a song idea for years. And I remember this idea and it was so good. And I'd written however much of it I'd written, and I'd lost the file that I recorded on a phone because it's all I had because I was at someone's house with a guitar. And I found it years later and I was so happy, absolutely elated. And I finished writing this guitar part and then I wrote a string quartet to it. And it's my favorite thing I've ever written. So it's just a nylon string guitar, 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. And the piece is called 58 Feelings, and I was so proud of it and just so relieved when I was able to see this thing come to fruition, which took years to write, which is often how these things go. I mean, some people like Burton Cummings write a song in 20 minutes, and if it doesn't happen, then it's out. But that one took me about 5 years to write. Um, and I just never forgot about it because I just knew it was this good thing, and there was always this feeling of I've lost something or someone because it just I don't often write things that I know have real potential. So yeah, that's a joyous thing, and I released that on my album Plug called Changing of the Guard as my radio voice if I can. And it the way I would describe the album, I don't know, when you put out an album and it sells well, it goes, you know, gold or platinum or diamond. Mine went wood. And, it sold about 500 copies is all I had pressed on CD and 100 copies on vinyl. And so yeah, that's otherwise it's just standard stuff. You're just in a quiet place and you just come up with something. I tend to stitch things together bit by bit. Rarely is it a whole thing that just happens stream of consciousness. I'm a big editor. I really edit. And what was it? Um Bukowski, I think he said, write, write drunk, edit sober. Whatever it is that loosens you up and gets those parts of your brains going, just yeah, I'm not gonna be sitting here advocating drug use or whatever, but just sometimes we have our conditioning of the world just sometimes bogs us down and we can go through ruts. And there's all kinds of delightful chemical ways that you can access the parts of your brain that lie dormant, and everyone responds to them differently. And I don't think I've ever created in any kind of a state like that, but but I know those who do, and if we are seeing the evidence of I don't know the entirety of the 1960s, we will know that it went quite well.
Let's talk about your album for a little
Yeah,
bit, though, because I read that Brian May praised one track off that, like, immediately after hearing it. For those of you who don't know, from Queen, right?
yeah. Yeah, well, it's because I without even realizing it, it was just that because I don't know if I realized it, it's just his style is just is so central to who I became as a musician, and not everything I do sounds like what he does, of course. There's tons and tons of different things I do, but a lot of what I do, that can still happen, especially if I want it to happen. And it was the only vocal piece on the album. It was mostly instrumental pieces played on a whole bunch of different instruments and in weird tunings. It was a fascinating creative process for me because I was just playing in different tunings and I was trying to rediscover how to just make music differently than ways I'd done it in the past. And that's largely why I called it changing of the guard. It was just me reinventing how I can make art in my own way for me. And that was the one kind of traditional song that was on it. Just, verse, chorus, interlude, verse, chorus, and out. And the interlude is not unlike one of those Queen songs from the 1970s with just the mountain of guitars that sounds like an orchestra. and you have them playing off each other. In If you're listening in stereo, not on a phone with a speaker that is this big, an actual stereo system, then you just hear the the two channels of the layers of guitars left and right playing off each other, making an arrangement. And and it's very inspired by Brian May, but I kind of made them play off each other in my own way. And and the subject matter of the song was called "The Daily Grind," just just being about the fact that we all have one, that we all have the things that we all have our own suffering and the things that we struggle with. And I put mine that were there at the time into the form of that song, but I also tried to be universal about it, about the nature of the passage of time and the things that we do and the things that we don't do. And and it's a song that it was in a major key. It sounds happy. The words are solemn and reflective, but nevertheless, it's in a major key. And major keys tend to sound happier. And sometimes I mean, it's not that it's a conscious choice. You're not deciding, I'm going to write a song in this key and it's going to sound like this for whatever reason. It's just the way it comes out. But sometimes, you know, just sad, reflective lyrics can still come out sounding happy. And maybe that kind of lessens the blow of it to make it more listenable and digestible, I don't know. But anyway, it's in a major key, and but then for the middle and the instrumental, I go to the relative minor. And that's where kind of the darkness shows up. And but then by the third chorus, I try to lyrically kind of lift it up to leave it on a bit of a higher note and kind of questioning are you, was I really blind in a daily grind? And just and I because you don't want to leave it as we're all going to make those choices. I kind of give options of how are we going to deal with our daily grind? How much time are we willing to have pass before, without trying to sound like a self-help book, but how long will you wait until you actually do the thing that you want to do, or let your whole life pass or not? So it's that kind of song. And I just thought would musically color it in a way that made sense with the subject matter of it. And in the same way that a Queen song almost always was, the three choruses are not alike. There's always a difference, because you always want to kind of open a door, have a little window into a different part of the song, and just not repeat what you're saying. So if you listen carefully to any of these songs that I wrote, but particularly that one, it's just every time it goes through a pass, it's always something different. And in the case of that one, just the first chorus is just me singing. The second chorus has a choir of me's panned hard left to the hard right, and the third chorus has the choir again, but it's a different choir with a different arrangement. And just I always found that kind of music to be so gratifying to listen to, the kind of music that you have to listen to several times. And people then told me that, yeah, I listened to your album many times, and a lot of things made sense after the second, third, fourth listens, and that's exactly what I wanted.
It sounds like you nailed it.
Yeah, I suppose with those who got to hear it. Anyway,
Yeah.
it didn't really go anywhere, but the thing is, but getting that kind of, just, I don't know, praise, whatever you call that, just response from Brian, that's just worth more than all the Grammys I'll never win. So, yeah, you can offer me the Grammys and I'll be like Eddie Vedder and just leave them on a shelf and acknowledge it for 3 seconds and then drive on. Because, yeah, just to have, I don't know, it's different when it's your peers or people that you respect telling you that they appreciate a thing that you did. It's everyone, you appreciate different kinds of feedback when it comes, and you don't want to have that be your motivator. The same way you don't want criticism and the bad reviews motivating you and making you sad. You just It's kind of Buddhist Zen, Zen in a way, where you honor it and just let it go, because that's not why I'm doing this. And but let's be real. Brian loved a song that I wrote. Just, yeah, of course, pinch me.
So was that album before or after the production of We Will Rock You? But you did in Toronto, right? And you
Yeah.
auditioned for Brian May and Roger Taylor.
Yeah, that was
What
all
was that
afterwards.
like?
Yeah, this is all yeah, that stuff was before. I was 24. I mean, I first started writing to Brian when I was about 20, 20, yeah, about 20. And and he was just nice to me from day one. I caused attention and just literally changed my life. Everything pretty much that subsequently came is because he was kind to me and gave me a chance. But he's a wonderful person, just legit wonderful and so generous. And what it was like, I remember there were 2 auditions, and he and Roger Taylor showed up to the second audition, and I remember he wasn't feeling well that day, but, he's a huge photographer, and he brought his camera with him, and he took photos of every person that auditioned, and just memorized everyone's names and just that's just what he's like. He was the kind of person when Queen toured, just there's photos of him in South America and not just learning 3 words of Portuguese during the concert to recite. He had the book in his hand to learn the language, so he would conduct interviews on the radio and TV. And just he's a very just conscientious person like that to just go the extra mile. And there we are at an audition, and just every single person's name he remembers. That instantly stuck with me of what his character is like. And just never mind the fact that he's famous and all that. Just you don't meet many people like that in this world. And just taking a photo to make sure that everyone stays in his mind so that they make the right decision as they're doing this. And he wants to remember every single person. I just thought that's a beautiful thing. And but I was I wasn't intimidated. I mean, I was just complete fish out of water. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never been in any remotely professional situation like that. I'd done other musical theater and played other shows and stuff, but not like this with
Right.
serious Toronto players.
And you were a
And it was
guitarist in that production, right?
yeah, and so there's 2 guitar chairs, bass, drums, percussion, and 3 keyboards. That was the house band. Um, Not a pit though, because typically musical theater's in the pit, but this was actually elevated up behind and on top of the stage with a curtain that would come up and down a couple of times, so the band was actually integrated into the show. So when we got to play with Brian and Roger at one of the shows, this happened many times later because I did a touring version of it as well, which is another story. Um, but then we got to play with them, and of course we were visible, and they lifted the curtain that night when we played Bohemian Rhapsody, so that we could enjoy that with them and getting to play with rock royalty. Just that doesn't happen every day. And I remember Roger Taylor's sound check was so fastidious. I've heard the stories of their sound checks that in the 70s, just they would take 2.5 hours to do sound checks because they were so picky already by that point, just 50, 60 gigs in. I mean, because they didn't play all the crappy gigs. They avoided the crappy gigs. And by the time they've played maybe 50 gigs, they're famous already with Queen 2 out. And so they didn't have the road experience a lot of bands have when they slog it out as a bar band for years, like the Beatles did in Hamburg. Just they didn't do that. Zeppelin didn't do that. Um, but early on, that was their process. And I got to watch with my own eyes Roger Taylor taking nearly an hour sound checking just to make
Yeah.
sure that his sound in his monitor, just doing a simple beat and just clearly just making sure everything is exactly how he wanted it for playing 2 songs. Because it doesn't matter how long the show is, the setup time is exactly the same. Because you're not gonna do a worse show because it's a shorter show, it's still the show. And yeah, it was 2 songs, but it was a full sound check, and we just patiently waited, and that's when I just realized, yeah, this is what some professionals are like. They're so particular about their sound because they've been doing it at that point for about 40 years, and he knows, exactly what he wants.
Yeah. So how different is it playing your music, your original music versus, honoring and doing proper covers?
After a while, especially if it becomes your own arrangements, there's not much of a difference. There really isn't a divide. When I play Pink Floyd songs, when I play solo acoustic, and you can watch these videos on my website and my
Oh, and
YouTube
I
channel.
have.
And, oh, that's so great. And just I know I didn't write the songs, but when it's your arrangement of a song, it still becomes yours. I mean, ask Rod Stewart. I mean, "Have I Told You Lately?" I'm sure feels like it's his song because his version is so uniquely his version of that song. And I feel that way about any song that I truly enjoy playing. It almost feels like it's mine because I kind of embody it in my own way and I present it in my own way, especially as the music historian type, to really capture the right feeling of the song. I very often put myself in the headspace of the artist writing and creating that music. And that's the curiosity in me of what was going on in the world at that time, what was going on in the band at that time, what was going in their heads and their lives at that time to make this music happen. And I do my best to be conscious of this stuff when I play this music so I can best capture that side of it, but I also have my own style because I'm not lifting the songs note for note, and I bring that into it as well. And so my own personality, my own character comes out at the same time. So you kind of have your own ownership over these things. I hope lawyers aren't listening. I don't mean that kind of ownership. but, but that's honestly what it feels like. It feels like in some ways they're my songs. But the ones that you wrote yourself, of course, those are your babies, obviously. But for me, there isn't this hard 100-0 division of my songs and not my songs. I still feel very close to songs that I didn't write, as close as I am to songs I did write, because it's still important to me anyway. It doesn't matter if I wrote it. I didn't need to write it to be good. That's why they did it. And that's why I do it.
Right.
So
Are there any songs out there where they're just too perfect that you don't want to change the arrangement and or not even attempt to change it?
no, I can bastardize what I want, right? No, that's a fantastic question. And I got to sit with that for a second because absolutely, there are some things. For sure, there are guitar solos, especially as a guitar player, that are just they're just so perfectly written. I mean, Bohemian Rhapsody is just the Hamlet soliloquy of guitar solos. But Brian has never played it the same way twice because he's not that kind of player. He's an Alex Lifeson from Rush is not that kind of player. Most of the rock players aren't like that. They're not that studied. Even guys like John Petrucci from Dream Theater, he still has wiggle room. And but so many of those solos for him though are just parts, and they're beautiful. I don't know if you know Dream Theater, but when he plays Octavarium, just that solo is just one of the greatest things created by our species. And that is such a gorgeous thing that if I was ever to cover that song in a band, I would absolutely learn that solo note for note because it is crafted in the same way that just a Haydn symphony was crafted. I wouldn't dare change a note of that apart from making a mistake. But in terms of the stuff that I play, I guess I like to choose things that do have that wiggle room, because it's fun. I love taking things that aren't even guitar music and putting them onto the guitar. So you're forced to make your own arrangement. A piece like which one? Billy Joel, My Life. I don't think has any guitar on it, but I've got a guitar arrangement of that, and I just enjoy those kind of challenges. But let me see if there's anything in my repertoire that I play that I absolutely will play no for. Yes, the Rain Song by Led Zeppelin. I do not play a single unless I blow it, but my aim is to play it exactly like the record as best I can. So the main rhythm part, of course, I play one pass with that, and then I come around and I do my best to play the second pass with the mellotron and the bass and everything. I try to capture all those parts, and I want to get as close as possible when I do "And You and I" by Yes. That is gospel. I would never dream of improvising a note around that piece. I think there's a tiny, tiny bit of liberty I take in the kind of chicken picking section towards the end, a very, very, very tiny little bit. But basically, just the ink is the ink. I mean, that arrangement is just that Close to the Edge by Yes, it is up there with any Beethoven or Stravinsky symphony. Fight me, you're wrong. It's just, beautiful, beautiful music, and it's just cannot change a note. When I play Close to the Edge, I do the keyboard solo in the middle, and yes, for sure, there's a tiny bit of wiggle room in that, but still, you got to capture Rick Wakeman's feeling in that. It's a very specific kind of solo that he plays on keyboards, and I try to capture that on the guitar. So yeah, those kinds of pieces for sure. I want to stick to the ink because they were just crafted so beautifully with love and care that you don't want to stray too far away from it because they were composed like that for a reason. Well, case by case basis.
Yeah. So does that tie into the classic albums live stuff that I was reading about earlier?
Yes, that is a note for note recitation. And that is, people may not think that is creative. And I guess not in that sense, because yeah, there's not much presentation. You're dressed in black and that's it. But there's still the science of that, of trying to capture what was captured in a studio over months of time to find the gear to play that music live and capture those same sounds and perform it, because that's a whole other way of presenting music. It's the same way as seeing a symphony. It's absolutely the symphony. You're going to listen to Bach, and they're playing the Brandenburg concertos, and you don't want to hear that improvised. You want to hear it exactly as Bach composed it. But rock and roll, of course, can go either way. And bands do what they want with their own songs over time. And some bands are wildly different from how they play live. Led Zeppelin, the Grateful Dead, Fish. But then you've got bands that stay very close to the albums. Old Genesis, they became more adventurous later on when they would cover when they play songs like Abacab, and they would be having a lot of fun with that and created a different arrangement live. But typically Genesis was stick to the ink kind of band because that was the compositions. They weren't the Mississippi Delta blues type. They were English grammar school boys, and they were raised on classical music, and so that was their Mississippi Delta blues. So yeah, what that is definitely the former. That is, do your homework and figure out how this music was made. And just and a lot of the players there don't read, which is fascinating. There's a lot of professional musicians that can't read, and there's a lot of them there, but the ears on these musicians are some of the absolute best ears I've ever heard. It's almost like when you lose a sense, you lose your sense of smell, and one of your other senses is heightened. And it's like that with musicians too. Everyone has their fortes of what they specialize in. And yeah, amazing, amazing ears on these people. Because now, of course, what you have is we have the that there's good AI technology for separating multi-track mono and stereo recordings to hear the isolated instruments, and with incredible accuracy now. That did not exist 10 years ago, barely 5 years ago, but now the technology is very, very good, and amazing things are being done with that. But back then, no, you listened to the album and that was it. And before that was on, literally on vinyl with the needle. But then, by my day, it was digital and you could have it open in your waveform editor and just zoom in on a section and figure out what the part is that's being played. If the transcription isn't right, which was often the case, that was your job. And so, yeah, I covered a bunch of different albums with classic albums live like that, and toured, and wonderful experience to play the same album, 15, 20 times. And we did Queen and I at the Opera. That was my first tour with them. And there's a piece on Night at the Opera called Good Company. And it's almost just discarded as a filler track because it's in between two of the greatest songs ever made. It's after Love of My Life and before Bohemian Rhapsody. And and just it's just not noticed, which is so sad because at the end of that band, Brian May does a Dixieland jazz band with guitars. And so the backing track of the song is drums, bass, and ukulele, and the guitar on top is the orchestra, which is the Dixieland Jazz Band, where he makes his guitars sound like clarinet, trumpet, and trombone. And with his guitar that he made with the different pickup settings, roll off the tone knob, use a wah pedal and throw it half back, any combination of these things, he was able to, with his technique as well, be able to emulate those three instruments. And if you can go onto YouTube, you can look for Brian May on a Night at the Opera documentary done about 20 years ago. He's at the mixing board and he isolates just those three guitars, and they're in stereo, left, right, and center. And that was for transcribing. Every book and transcription I found was wrong, 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 hideously wrong, because it was impossible because it was so much going on. But when you take out the bass, ukulele, and drums and hear just those three guitars, then you hear everything clear as day. I charted the whole thing out, handed out three charts, and played them once in rehearsal, and perfect. And that was it. One night we're on the tour, and we filmed, and that night we played it absolutely perfectly. I ran to Brian, as one does, told him that this happened, and he said, "I can't wait to see the video." Sent it to him, and he just wrote back to me and said, "Thank you. I am so thrilled that somebody has properly, finally done this once."
You've also done a lot of tribute band work too, which I
Yeah.
think you said that's more like musical archaeology.
It can be, yeah, because yeah, you're replicating something that once was, and some tribute bands do the dress up thing and some don't. But tribute bands have opportunity for creativity as well because you can do things that the original band never played live or in ways they never played it. You can come up with your own arrangements for these things. And and sometimes it can border on sacrilege, but if you do it with the right care, people love that so much. And so so one of my bands, I had a Genesis band, the Genesis Experience, and every show after a while, I started doing an acoustic set in the middle, and every night would be different. I wouldn't even tell the band what I was going to do. I just kept it to myself, and so
Kind
my
of
audience
mean, no?
it's I think they enjoyed it though,
Yeah.
because it just what is he going to do?
Yeah.
And if we dropped a song from the set that night, there was a chance it would show up in the acoustic set because I would make a different arrangement of it.
That's
And
cool.
so it's fun. And that for sure was one of the joys of playing in a tribute band. There's so much more to that than just doing something that was done before.
Yeah.
And making a medley of 3 or 4 Genesis songs, for an audience, and if you're a real connoisseur of that band, um, just I would at the end, I would just throw in the last 10 seconds of the musical box, and just that music is scripture to Genesis fans, and to even acknowledge 10 seconds of that song there's a feeling of warmth in an audience when they know that you know them to do that for them. It's this back and forth thing that happens. That's some of my most cherished memories of playing that music for sure, is doing the little acoustic set with just a mic in front of my face, put my chair right at the edge of the stage, and it's just like you're hanging out in the living room in a theater, and just playing a thing with this old music that you made yourself. You must edit this. This is getting way too long. You're making me think of things I haven't thought of in such a long time, and it's just such happy memories, and when enough time passes, because when a band ends, you're sad about a band ending, of
Yeah.
course. Sometimes you're happy a band ended, that's another story, but often you're sad when a band ends. Even if you're relieved that a band ended because there was drama or something, there's still a sadness of it ending, and it's a little bit of a grieving process. But enough time passes, and I look back on this now, and God, these are such happy memories of 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 just creating things, on your own or creating things with other people, and you just feel lucky that you got to do it at all. Bringing these stories out of me, I haven't thought of this stuff in years. This is so nice.
Well, we try not to be a typical interview show with, a question answer. It's very
Yeah.
much conversations. I thoroughly enjoy conversations with people.
Yeah, I can tell that, and you enjoy learning,
I
and,
do.
you're a cute cat, and so is your cat,
I
apparently.
mean, she tried to kill me before. Did you see it? She took all the headphones and
Yeah, that was pretty great, yeah. Let's keep going. I'm happy to do it.
Enjoying the show? Good. We want to keep it that way. If you have a guest suggestion, a story to share, or just want to get in touch, send a message to interviews@roundaboutcreativechaos.com. Now, where were we?
So we do have this part of the show where I don't know if you're familiar with Marcel Proust and his questionnaire.
You do it's kinda like the Colbert questionnaire, but this is where it originates. Let's have it, let's have it. This is so great.
Tim normally does this part of the show, but he makes
Mhm.
fun of me because I made the questions. And in
Right.
his honor of not being here, I will throw in one of his questions at the end just for you.
Okay. I'm sure he'll be honored.
Yes. But the first question
Mm.
is, what is your favorite word?
That's so hard to ask a writer that because there's so many words and applications of words that are used. Oh, that is a treacherous question. So a word that I like, ah, I feel like I want to submit this question to you, this answer to you at a later time for you to throw in because I know there's so many words I love. No, I have a word. I'm going to give it to you. I don't know if it's my favorite word, but there's a fantastic book that was written many, many years back. It's called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And it's it's it was written by, I believe, a professor or at least a PhD in Latin. And it's because the English language is really good at business and comedy, but it is not good at feelings. Whereas so many other languages have this incredible vocabulary for describing complex feelings in a single word. And a few of these such words have kind of filtered their way into English. We tend to hear from German Schadenfreude, the joy at someone else's misfortune, particularly if it's deserved. Otherwise, you're just being mean. But for those who deserve it, that typically is Schadenfreude. So the whole "hey, it couldn't have happened to a better guy" type thing. The Germans came up with one word for that, and it's Schadenfreude. And a lot of these European languages, especially, have just hundreds and hundreds of these words to describe complex feelings. And so this person took it upon themselves to make an English version of this to describe things that we universally feel and just say the idea of the feeling of photographing something that you know has been photographed 100 million times already. And why are you doing it? So things like that. And he would come up with words based on the original Latin of two of those words. Maybe that particular word was from capture and many moments, whatever it would have been, perhaps in the Latin, he would then put the word together and have a full page with a photo of what that word means. And he's trying to just bring back this thoughtfulness to this language that we typically don't have. Um, so one such word in that book that I loved so much, and I used it in my Max Webster book at one point. And again, it comes from Latin, and the word this guy stitched together is called anemoia, Anemoia, and it is feeling nostalgia for a time that you did not live in. It's basically the word that Woody Allen wishes he'd thought of when making Midnight in Paris. He just didn't have the word yet, but it's that it just captures films like that in a word. And I dearly love this book. And that, and as a music historian type, and most of the work I do is on music that was written before I lived. So basically, this word is my life. So yeah, I think that would be the answer to your question.
Thank you. I have a better question.
Oh no!
Don't hate me. What is your least favorite word?
Oh, ooh, ooh. The first thing that came to my mind, I might have a better answer than this, but the first thing that came to my mind um, was anything in the realm of as per just the words can't, don't, won't. Words that I'm talking about, not about boundaries. I'm talking about just your own belief in yourself versus imposter syndrome or some other force, some form of fear that you have. And of course, we all have different relationships to fears, depending on our childhoods. Really, some people are left with traumas that others aren't. But nevertheless, it's our responsibility to deal with these things and make sure that they don't project out into the rest of the world, especially so that they don't affect the people around us, and that and that we live the best lives that we can. And so, yeah, those are the kind of words that come to my mind. So I guess the word then would be fear, because you need a healthy dose of fear for sure. Because as Elizabeth Gilbert said in Big Magic, a fearless person is a sociopath. So, but it's just how you apply the word fear. So I don't want to just blanket statement fear and just, but I have to have that kind of explanation to go along with it. It's what that represents in us and what holds us back. And I think not conquering fears is probably some of the poorest decisions that we can make.
Which do you like the most? Books, movies, music, or games?
Music, no question.
Yeah, I was like, I know what he's going to answer on this one.
But the thing is, they all have their place. Obviously, they're all they all can be a form of escape, and they all can be a form of just lifelong fulfillment. Much more than just kind of peripherally, passively engaging in them. It's all about what your relationship is with it. Do you put on Netflix to watch a movie and really be present with it, or is it a thing that's on the background? And books, I mean, in films and in books, fiction particularly, its purpose, I find, is it conveys things about the human experience that only stories can. And we've been telling stories as a species for as long as we've been able to talk. And stories are, you know, basically the only way to change someone's mind. You can't, please look at the internet. You can't change people's minds with facts. No, there's two ways you can change people's minds: with stories and by proving to someone that their beliefs will cause their children to die, which is a biological function. So, of course, that part of your brain will then intervene to make sure that you change your mind because your offspring cannot die because they won't be able to proliferate the species, not just that you love your child. That's biology. So, so storytelling is hugely important. So I don't want to sound like I'm picking music out of self-interest, but for me, what music often is, see, music, and I'm going to sound snobby, and I don't care because this is because we have done decades of research into the brain to show that music uses so many parts of your brain unlike any other activity. If you look up in the early 80s, it was the eight kinds of intelligence. There's spatial, physical intelligence, emotional intelligence, interpersonal, intrapersonal. Those are two different things. Mathematical intelligence. Yeah, spatial and physical intelligence. That's athletes and actors, musical theater actors, particularly stage actors, knowing where their blocking is. Um, One of the types of intelligence is musical intelligence, because this guy rightly knew that it uses so many parts of the brain in a way that no single activity does. And I love music in film because the best soundtrack is the one you almost don't even notice, and it colors a scene in a way that if you just eliminated it, the scene wouldn't be nearly as profound. And that application of it is, of course, one of the most amazing things our species does. But there's a creative element of listening to music that when you make it a passive thing that is just a thing that passes every 3 minutes, and then the next song on your playlist, and the next song on your playlist, randomly. That's not how music was made. It was meant to be made, at least if it's from the 1960s till the 80s. I mean, for sure, that 65 to 75 period, that specific period of the album, that is an artist's statement at that time, those 40 to 45 minutes of music. And the way that you can paint pictures in your mind without the visual, that is what the music video killed. I sound like I'm being a dinosaur here, but there is a creativity in listening to music and in creating those images. There's no other art form that does that. Reading books allows you to escape into other worlds that aren't your own, and that is special and that is so necessary. But music engages your brain in a way that all those other things that or even music plus something else don't. Because music alone allows you to be creative with it in a way that those other things don't.
Who is your favorite fictional character?
Oh, my favorite fictional character. Hmm. I think from Looney Tunes, the turtle Cecil. Cecil is such a badass. And there's only the one well-known Looney Tunes flick with Cecil in it. But if you have the DVD set like I do because I'm a giant dork, there are many previous Cecil films that there were. And he's just, without question, my favorite Looney Tunes character. But he just represents so much about just calmly taking your time. And he's a wonderful reminder of those things. There's tons of great fictional characters, but that's the first one that came to my mind. I love Cecil.
Where's the most interesting place you have ever been?
Oh, my own head.
Want to elaborate?
Haven't you been listening? um, hey, I realize the question that you're asking.
No,
Uh,
actually, you don't, because I mean, you do. Most people answer with a physical location on or near the world.
hmm.
You're the first to answer what I'm really trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, places can be so many things. That's one of the beauties of the English language. If you're learning the language, it's hell because words have the same word can have 12 meanings. But yeah, what is a place? Redemption is a place. Kindness is a place. Hell is a place. Heaven's a place. And you create these things in your life. These are all places. And yeah, so my mind is a pretty interesting place because it's what allows me to make decisions throughout my day of just how am I going to live today? Am I going to have a quiet day to myself, or am I going to go out there and be kind? And am I going to how am I going to perceive the rest of the world? And how is it going to make my life better? And then how am I then the next day going to use that thing that happened to make someone else's life better? So yeah, I think the most interesting place and possibly the most destructive place, but those days are mostly behind me now. I'm happy to say I'm in a good place right now, and I think that's the answer. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think yeah, my favorite place is when my brain can shut off and I can just sit there at a pond watching ducks and read a book.
Who is the most interesting person you've ever met?
That's definitely not me. Um, might be Brian, but you know what? I think the answer is Richard Dawkins because everyone knows how brilliant he is because he's the Darwin of our time. Dawkins is an absolutely brilliant man, but he wasn't the most interesting person I ever met because of his intelligence. Richard Dawkins is the most interesting person I ever met because of his blind spots. And I got to have a 3-hour conversation with him over dinner at an astronomy conference in the Canary Islands. And and he revealed to me, without even perhaps realizing it, his blind spot of he was such a nice man. He's known as this acerbic guy that has this really rough edge around him, but it's just kind of a personality, not even a quirk. It's kind of his public persona. That's almost a performance in a way, in the same way that George Carlin was kind of the angry comic later in his career, with his all his brilliant philosophical observations. But but ask his wife, and he was just a giant teddy bear who was the biggest kid that she ever knew, and he was a kind and a well-read man and the whole thing. And of course, I believe it wholeheartedly. Um, but but George, not George Carlin, Richard Dawkins. It was wonderful spending time with him, and and just hearing all about his real feelings with a complete stranger, his real feelings and his his anxieties and his concerns, and it was such a wonderful, vulnerable conversation that we had, and it didn't feel like a famous person. Just I knew I was who I was talking to, of course, but it was just meeting a person, and but knowing how potent this man's mind is. I mean, this man wrote this, just the selfish gene. I mean, that's just literally just that's our generation's Darwin, and he asked me to take him through a typical day of mine as a musician. And I said to him, "Well, I don't really have typical days because every day is different, but I'll take you through an interesting day. I'll take you through a gigging day," and tell him about up to that point of how, depending on if you're with a company doing a thing or if you've curated a thing yourself, you have to book all the things yourself, your transport and do your rentals and take care of accommodations and show up and load out, and the crew helps you, set your things up, and you do your sound check and have dinner and do the performance, and then you load out and all that stuff, and some of which he for sure could relate to because he does speaking events. So the sound check doesn't really exist so much in a public speaking thing because it's one mic and a monitor. Um, so, but for music, of course, they can be very lengthy sound checks, as we were talking about earlier. But when I explained to him what that kind of a day as a musician looked like, he gave me the blankest look that I've probably ever received from a person. And in that moment, I just realized, oh my God, this man is so utterly brilliant. And I just realize now how, because he talked about his loneliness as well, of what it's like um, to be as intelligent as he is, and how it's sometimes it's difficult for him to be able to find people that he really wants to converse with in a meaningful way, and because not everyone's up for the kinds of conversing that he's up for. So combining that with just the blank look that I got when I described to him my day, I just realized, wow, this guy's brain is operating at such a high level that he has so little room for anything else. He was genuinely curious, but you notice this when people are generalists, they can kind of do everything kind of well, or many things kind of well. But the more you're an overachiever or just excelling at one thing, your blind spots for other things go in the other direction because you only have so much room because so much of your attention goes towards those things. And to a point, I can definitely understand that. But this was just the extraordinary version of that I saw in that look. And that's when I realized that just these people who are extraordinarily brilliant just have no room for anything else. And when understanding that level of excellence, I realize it entails both of those things of what they can do and what they can't do. And that was such a valuable life lesson. So I learned that from him because he's one of the smartest humans who's ever lived, and it's not because he's smart that I learned that. It's because of where his limits of his smarts are, that was so interesting.
What is something you own that cannot be replaced?
Again, the word own implies a physical thing, but I guess it doesn't have to be. See, I know you word this carefully. So so I wanted to just, if you hadn't asked your previous question about the place, I would have said perhaps some part of my mind that's vital to my existence, but we already did that, so I'm not gonna go there. So something I own that I can't replace. Um, that would have to be I'm looking right now at my external hard drive, the data that is on that. Just my most important things get backed up every day, that's fine. But into multiple places, so I'm not worried about that. But just the musical data in my own writings that are on there of all my incomplete ideas, yeah, that all gets backed up, daily or close to it for sure somewhere. But all the music that is on there and the videos I have collected in all kinds of forms of of my life, and the photography that I have and how meticulously organized all this stuff is. That's probably my only truly irreplaceable thing. I mean, yeah, the guitar that I wrote so much of my music on, especially in my 20s with my trio euphonic, oh, I'd be heartbroken to lose that. But a guitar is a tool, and that ultimately is replaced. That's why David Gilmour had no problem ultimately selling off all his old guitars for charity. So it wouldn't even be a guitar. It's just I love those instruments, but I can adapt to new ones pretty quickly, and I'd be fine. I'm not as attached to them as a lot of other musicians are, because I didn't make a guitar like Brian May or Tom Scholz. So that's not essential to me. Honestly, it's that hard drive. It is just so much of my digital life is in there, and it's amazing that we have this, and it's organized in such a way that I can just find anything I'm looking for within seconds, and just all of my work, not all my work, but, tons of my work comes out of that thing. That is irreplaceable. If I lost every version of that, I would probably just go and become a monk. Because what's the point of starting to collect that again?
Right. What have you changed your mind about in the last year?
That's such a great question. That I can trust my instincts a lot better than I used to. I used to pride myself on the whole, well, I follow through with things. This is one of my best features and fatal flaws, especially best feature, that I just see things through so that I have no regrets. That's often a good way of going through things, especially relationships. But but your instincts are telling you things too. And I've often not been good with that. So I have learned in the last year that I need to be much better at trusting my instincts. And very, very important life lesson to get to.
Question number 9. What
Number
is
9.
the number 9, number
Number
9, number 9. What is the worst job you ever had?
I'm delighted to say I cannot give you a straight answer to that question
Yay!
because all of my jobs have had redeemable things. And the answer to your question was my telemarketing job I had throughout high school and college into my early 20s. And just one day I woke up there 32 hours a week working there. It's just, oh my God, this is not going to be my life. So, so that's the obvious answer. But at that place, though, I still had a lot of fun with the people that I worked with, and I had so much downtime there in between calls and when I was pretending to be working. I learned so much music and I composed music because I got to be alone with my thoughts. I could sit at the solo table if I wanted to and not with other people. And I just, in my mind, I was just, oh my God, I have 4 hours here. Yeah, I'm going to have to work for half of this 5 hour shift, but I can spend 2.5 hours of this. I'm in a musical theater show. I'm in the orchestra. I've been asked to create an overture for this show, and these songs are in my head now, and I'm writing out in sticks and dots my overture for this, and I would do that during that job. But yeah, there was even good in that job. But yeah, that was your question, right? What was my worst job I've ever had? Yeah, that was without question the worst. Working on a cruise ship during the pandemic was a close second, though. Playing guitar doing that because they wouldn't let us off the ship at all for 4 months. It was, I mean, talk about human rights violations. I mean, just not letting people go for a walk because it was guest areas. You couldn't get off the ship. You could not go for a walk or a jog unless it was in a really tiny gym. But there's no labor laws out there, so they can do whatever they want. Um, that's the very short version of it. Yeah, I went nuts during those 4 months. But I did a lot of good work when I was there too. I had a lot of time on my own, but that was not a good period of my life 5 years ago. And yeah, that's an extremely close second. And come to think of it now, I think that's the answer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Working on
okay.
a cruise ship during a pandemic where you're literally in a boat prison, which is perhaps unfair to prisons because prisons have windows and conjugal visits, and this didn't. It was a way for you to develop gratitude later for
Mhm.
what you do have. When you realize what you can live without, you complain a lot less. And not everyone gets to learn these kinds of lessons.
Alright, what is your greatest achievement?
Um, Being able to become a kind person against all odds.
What is your biggest regret?
None.
Good. Shouldn't have regrets.
There's tiny things I would have liked to have done differently, I suppose. So the only regret I can think of is hurting people.
Okay, that's a good one to have.
Yeah. I mean, we're all doing the best we can. Some of us aren't. Some of us are definitely going back to the fear thing. Some of us are stuck in fears, and we hurt people with those because we chose not to do the work to get past our fears. Um, some people just don't have the tools. Um, but eventually you hit a point where you should be able to, especially if you're repeating behavior for the hundredth time that you shouldn't be, and you're being screamed in your face telling you, not that naming any names, that perhaps this behavior is not serving you and the people around you. So, yeah, if that's the situation you're in, then yeah, good luck. But no matter where we are, what station we're at, we're hurting people, and we all do it. And we just hope the people that we hurt will eventually be okay and they quietly forgive us in their minds and their hearts the way that we do to them. So that's ultimately still, but you can still take ownership for it and just be all, yep, I hurt these people, and you just hope that they landed okay and that they don't hold it against you. Because, what did Carrie Fisher say? Resentment is drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Yeah, not happening. I think that's the answer to that question, is just you regret hurting people.
We were just talking about fear a moment ago, so it ties perfectly into this question number 12. What do you fear the most?
Hmm. I think physical pain. Just the kind of physical pain that just in films like The Count of Monte Cristo, just that kind of just putting a person to their physical brink is just so what so many people have sadly had to endure at one point or another in their lives, usually undeservingly. And that is just a long, drawn out end of life with a lot of pain. I don't want that. I just friend of mine's dad just died at 93. It was just I don't feel well, and he sat down in his chair and he checked out. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
So
I said to my husband the other day, I said, I'm not afraid to die. It's inevitable. I'm almost looking forward to the next journey, but I am afraid of
yes,
dying. There's a difference.
yeah, I think there's that moment, probably 15 seconds before you die, where you just have that tremendous clarity that it's all of your greatest moments that you experience at the same time, um, and none of them all at once. Kind of the way George Harrison described the first time he had LSD as all of his happiest moments all at once, but just but without any attachment to any of it or anything particular. There's just I think there is this clarity that happens. I had a really good friend that died of cancer about a year ago, and the last thing he said as he went into his final down he went was just he said, "Endless beauty." And just that was him having that moment. I have no doubt.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, this next question is not endless beauty. I could tell you that for sure. But this is my
Oh,
favorite
no.
question in all of the 13. And I am pretty sure Marcel Proust never would have asked this question.
Oh boy, I'm a little nervous now. Oh my goodness.
Oh, don't be. Although this is the one that determines, like Tim used to say, this your answer determines whether or not the episode gets published. So no pressure.
Oh my goodness. No pressure indeed. Oh god, you wasted how much time? Like, you can't afford me.
Oh, wait, actually, I promised you that I would ask you Tim's question. So I'm going to give you
Yes, that's the
14 questions. I'm going to
okay,
defer
so
this
okay,
question one more
yes.
and give you Tim's
Yes, Tim's
question.
question.
It's Tim's question.
Yes, Tim is the penultimate question here.
Yeah, it drives me crazy this question. Actually, there are two questions. The one question that drives me crazy is he always asks people, "What number am I thinking of?" And no
Hmm,
matter what you
yes.
guess, he always says you're wrong and he never tells you the right number. I think he's lying. So anyway, his other question
Well,
is
Colbert did that one too,
yeah,
so
yeah. I think Colbert does this one as well. What is your
yeah.
favorite sandwich?
My favorite sandwich. I've had so many great sandwiches, and I am not on anyone's payroll when I say this, but there's a place in the East End of Toronto. It's called the Rouge Kitchen. This tiny, tiny little place. uh, family-run business, wonderful people, and they have seasonal sandwiches. And they have this sandwich, the mango jerk chicken. The the 3 there's the 3 textures and flavors plus the bread, of course. The ciabatta bread is incredible, but just the recipe, it came from, a guy, and it ended up on their summer menu, and just the kick of the jerk chicken combined with the smooth sweetness of the mango is one of the greatest things I've ever tasted, and without question, that is my favorite sandwich. So anyone, if they're ever in Toronto in the summer, Bruce Kitchen, mango jerk chicken.
I'm gonna have to make a trip up there now. That sounds amazing.
Yep.
Okay.
You don't want to oversell it because, it's like if you say, "I love the best joke." It's never the best joke ever. So, but you asked my favorite sandwich, and there's your
All
answer.
right. Well, this has nothing to do with sandwiches, but in a weird kind of roundabout way, it does have something to do with eating.
Oh,
Oh God, that was gross.
okay.
Okay, here we go. What would you do in a zombie apocalypse?
I have so many questions here. See, I want to know, can we invent something to withstand it or to combat it or eliminate the problem? I guess the answer is no if it's an apocalypse. That implies the end time. I mean, are we outnumbered by these zombies? Are they all powerful and there's no way we can defeat them? Is there a way that we can collaborate with them? Is is there something we can build to make them want to change their course? I mean, these are all questions that I would want to spend my time answering. I would like to think that maybe I would just be, a person and just freaking out because we're still human and we have fears and reactions. But I would like to think that if there was some commune somewhere, because if they're not, if there's not enough of a multitude of these zombies, that there are still places for sane people to have discussions. I would want to be around those round tables, asking those kind of questions. Is there any intervention that can be done here to invent something so that this does not have to be our fate? But if you're asking the question, no, this is our fate and it's inevitable that we're all going to perish, then my answer is going to be very different. So you have to tell me what is the situation. And but if it's an apocalypse, I mean, are you saying that they're eventually going to eliminate our species and just none of us are going to be left at all? Um, well, then I'm gonna spend time with people I love. That's it. If there's no intervention possible and we're all going to die, I mean, if you had 15 minutes left to live, who would you spend it with? It doesn't have to be a zombie apocalypse. It's just we if at any point, any juncture in your life, you were told when the end of your life is going to be, oh, you would do things very differently. So if you know that this is a zombie apocalypse, what you're basically asking is, we have an approximate date and time when your life is going to end. What are your last decisions going to be? How are you best going to spend that time? And that's my simple answer.
I don't think that's a simple answer. I think it's a fantastic answer, actually. Maybe it is
Oh,
simple,
no.
but it's simply fantastic. How about we go with that? Well, listen, Bob, you have spent countless years preserving other people's legacies, what they've done, where they came from, who they were. 50 years from now, somebody opens up a box that says Bob Wegner on it. What do you want them to know about you? What are you hoping that your legacy is? What do you hope that they find that tells them who you were?
It doesn't need to be a box. They can just listen to this interview. I mean, if we have a time capsule, then great. Then I guess they'll find something. But any of the things I've created and left behind, that's what you have to do. If you don't create something, I mean, maybe you can have kids, and if you raise good kids, then of course that also can be a form of legacy. But in lieu of that, you have to create something. And this is not why I've created things. I mean, I'll be dead. I won't care. But if there's anything that's worthy of remaining, because people find value in it, well, then I guess that's a lucky break that people will still find that valuable. I can't confirm that anything I've left behind and going to leave behind is going to be valuable to future generations. That's up for them to decide. So, and I can't predict that. So I can't really spend much time thinking um, about that kind of thing. But I'd like to think that we're always going to be curious about preserving the history of art. People are always going to be curious about that, and it's great that we try to digitize everything. But if ones and zeros implode someday, then a lot of work's going to go by the wayside. So my brain goes there when you say that. What would I want to be in the box? Well, for sure, my book that I wrote. I mean, it's a story about a band. It's a story about Canadian music history, but part of my own story is in there too. I mean, the stories that we write, even if they're nonfictions, we clearly choose the stories we write because we can relate to them because sometimes they're autobiographical. And a story about an underdog band is, of course, in some ways autobiographical for me. So you can definitely learn a lot about me through the way I write that, especially through the footnotes. There's a whole other story underneath the story in the footnotes. So for sure, I'd like that to be in the box because there's a lot of me in that. I mean, as it stands, I'm 43 years old. I mean, nearly a quarter of my life is in that. If you include the second edition, that was a 10-year project. That's a quarter of my life. So that would have to be in there. Um, yeah, I'd like to think that there'd be photos in there of me with people that I had wonderful times with. I don't know how meaningful that will be to others if they don't know the other people, if they don't know me. You can go into someone's house and especially if they're older, they have photo albums. But if you don't know the people, you don't connect with them in the same way that you would if you know who the people are. But you can still glean from them the happiness in people, especially if they're spontaneous photos and not post photos. So I don't know if that would be valuable to someone looking at it. I think probably the best thing you can leave behind is your words. Your because words are just such a currency. And through words you can leave so much of yourself behind so that people can not just understand you, but they can understand themselves. And all we're trying to do is be a little better than whoever we were yesterday. And a lot of the time we improve that based on just reading. So yeah, I I think words. That's the simplest answer I can give you. And hopefully it'll just make someone's life better in ways that I was hoping to make people's lives better while I was here.
I like it. Listen, Bob, we've had a wonderful interview. We've gone through trials and tribulations to get to this point, and I think it
Yes,
it
me
was
too.
it was well worth it. For our listeners, how can they find you? What are you working on next? Where can they go?
Well, my website, bobwegner.ca, BOBWEGNER.ca. That's where you can find all of the things in my professional life, or most of them anyway, because there's some link in there somewhere to the things we've all spoken about, no doubt. So that's how they can most easily find me and contact me if they want to be subjected to more of this nonsense. Um, Funny, when you said trials and tribulations, I thought you were talking about the conversation itself. But no, you meant the preamble and trying to sort out our tech issues, which we did gratefully. Um, and what I'm working on now, I'm in the world of being. I'm still playing. I've got a show coming up in Toronto in a couple of months. It's on September 17th. I'm playing in a small theater, solo acoustic, doing that thing I do. It's called the Small World Center. It's a beautiful little theater. Holds maybe just 60, 70 people. It's a great intimate space. Perfect size for an audience because it's just much more than that. Not that I would hate playing Carnegie Hall, but it comes to a certain threshold where there's too many people and you can't say hi to everybody after the show. And to me, that's just as important as the show is saying hello, as if you're, the minister at the end of the church service and everyone says hello and shakes your hand. And that to me is just crucially important that you make sure that that you get to have a conversation with people that were at your show. And I love that that quantity of people. So I'm doing that, and I'm in the archival world. I'm going to be um, I'm actually not sure. I'm going to be working on a documentary um, about Indigenous people in Canada. I can't reveal it just yet what it is because it's still in production. But I'm going to either be a researcher or an archival producer, maybe a hybrid of the two. But basically sorting through a lot of old stuff, um, scientific papers, um, and the work of historians and such to just rummage through all that to make it into an accessible bunch of things that will likely end up in this film. And that's kind of work that I did for my book about a band, but people need this kind of work done for much more than that. They need that done for making, oh God, museum exhibits. I mean, just tons of things. People need this kind of work to be done. And so that's the two things I'm working on right now: the music world and the archiving
Well, I had a great time talking with you. I really did. I enjoyed our conversation. I'm glad it happened, despite technology
world.
doing what technology does best at the worst time, apparently. So
Yes. Well, we got it worked out. And thanks for being so um perseverant. Is that the adjective form of perseverance?
could be. It could be anything you
I
wanted
don't
it to
know.
be.
I don't know. Well, thank you for your perseverance.
Thank
I'll
you.
say a correct sentence for you. And I'm glad we did
Me
this.
too.
And I look forward to hearing this back. What a nice conversation it was indeed. You asked very, very thoughtful questions.
Thank you. Thank
And,
you.
and I'm definitely going to dig more into your history.
If any zombies happen to get into your house, go for the brains. We insist. Do not leave your house. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
I just want to start a
Well, folks, that wraps up another episode of Roundabout Creative Chaos. You can find us on the web at roundaboutcreativechaos.com. We're also on Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X at Roundabout Chaos. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. Maybe even send a friend our way. It's the best thing you can do for us and for them. Well, short of sending cookies. So until next time, stay sharp, keep your brains intact, and whatever you do, don't forget rule number 1, cardio.